Okay, so hello and a very warm welcome to today's digital lunch. Today's digital lunch will be hosted by Idean. We are Capgemini's strategic design agency. So we're part of the Capgemini family and are working with customer centricity, user experience, and new ways of working. We're very happy that so many of you could join and are interested in this very hot topic on how to facilitate engaging remote workshops. I'm pretty sure most of you are really familiar now with remote meetings, but it's still another level of going remote with workshops. And that's exactly what we're going to tackle today and give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So we'll spend the next 30 minutes together. And for the people, and for you to know, this will be recorded, so it will be available later on IT-praten.no. If you kind of didn't catch something or were not really sure, you can always go back. So, but before we start, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Caroline. I'm a senior service designer in Idean Oslo. My background is in organizational psychology and design thinking. And yeah, I've had the pleasure in quite a couple of years now to work with clients on solving their strategic design challenges, creating great customers experience, and in particular, introducing new ways of working into an organization. And we're here together as a team, together with Emily, that will introduce herself now.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emily, and it's so excited to be here and share our knowledge with all of you. I have a background in user research. I also work as a senior service designer with Caroline at Idean Oslo, and a lot of my work deals with learning development and organization design. So as Caroline mentioned, Idean, we are a global design agency that we often facilitate design process with clients and stakeholders on strategic design and also business design. So that means that we often have to facilitate different processes, and in our day-to-day, we need to facilitate discussions and collaborative workshops. So today is about showing the best practices and what we would like to show you as tips and tricks. So Caroline will actually go through the agenda with you.
Yes. So we have two main parts today. One is the tips for planning and running remote workshops. That will give you some hands-on tips and tricks and look into what happens before the workshop, during the workshop, and after a remote workshop. And then we'll have a showcase that Emily will walk you through, like a concrete example, so you can see how the setup can look like in real life. And we'll also, so we'll do most of the talking, but of course we want to engage with you guys. So there's a chat function that you can use, so please post your questions there. We'll have a 5-minute Q&A at the end of the session and hope to answer as many of the questions that you guys have. Also feel free to use chat for giving feedback throughout the session. Yes, so let's get started. The first part, tips for planning and running remote workshops. So here, the good news first, the tips and tricks for running a regular workshop, they still apply. So if you're familiar with doing face-to-face workshops and have done a few, you have quite a toolbox, don't forget that. So the regular rules of having good agendas, of structuring it well, facilitating and engaging the audience, that still applies. However, you need to adjust it. You really need to be adjusted, be flexible, and adapt your approach. Because you cannot translate a physical workshop face-to-face into the remote world. That doesn't work. And why does it not work? You see on the next slide that remote workshops, they do require extra brain capacity for both you as the facilitator and the participants in the room. In face-to-face, you can read body language, you can just cut a question here and there that is in the room and answer easily for everyone. And you get the feedback instantly. In remote workshops, that's not the case. So you really need to plan for that feedback, that interaction with your audience. And in order to do that, you need to prepare. Preparation is really key. And how you can prepare, we'll go now a little bit more into depth of it. So before the workshop. I said adapting is important. So the first thing actually you need to adapt is really your agenda. If you're used to like full-day workshops, have to divide them into more digestible, snackable sessions of 2 to 3 hours. Also, don't forget to plan for regular breaks. I mean, you would do that in a physical space, but plan for a coffee break so that people can go to the kitchen, grab a coffee, and also for physical breaks, and just not to be all the time in front of the screen. Then decide on the tools. So we had often quite some questions on what type of platforms should I use, how did I use it? In a second, I'll show you a few, but important to know that you need two types of tools, one collaboration workspace and one conferencing tool. And then planning your activities carefully. And that's super important. So for each activity, you really need to plan what functionality in that collaboration workspace are you using. For example, for which workshop are you using post-it functions, for which the chat function, for which other types of polls or engagement methods. So be very clear on that, and also prepare your digital canvases thoroughly. So as you would do in a physical space of having a poster and plan that, you need to do that in that collaboration tool and have there your instructions quite clear. One thing as well is clarifying roles. So we always have a co-facilitator, a dedicated person being there for the technical support. So whatever participant that didn't really get onto the tool or has difficulties, they have a person to reach out, and also someone monitoring the chat and be able to jump in and help the participants if they fall off. And then, of course, prepare your participants. So they need to be familiar with the tool. As I said, what you want to achieve is you want to reduce kind of the brain capacity that it takes to clarify or understand the tool. You want to make them as comfortable as possible with the tool so they can just focus on the content. And in order to do that, you need to prepare them well up front, test the accesses on the collaboration platform, and also onboard them. So I mentioned collaboration tools. On the left-hand side, you see different collaboration workspace tools. For example, Miro, Microsoft Whiteboard, or Miro. These are kind of the most prominent ones in the market. There are, of course, some other ones. But how you can imagine those tools is like, just imagine a digital whiteboard that is infinite, and you can put on lots of posts and different things. So that's a collaboration workspace that you need where you actually work in. And then you have on the right-hand side a conferencing platform. So that could be Teams, Google Meet, Cisco WebEx, or Zoom, which you use for video and audio. And you need one of each tool, one to work in and one to communicate through. And those collaboration workspaces, they have great templates. So here you see examples from on the left-hand side from Miro and for Microsoft Whiteboard as well. So they have existing templates, canvases, anything from mind mapping, brainstorming tools, retrospectives, customer journey maps that you can use and then adapt to your needs. But it's great, so you don't have to kind of prepare it totally from scratch. You can use one that is similar to what you want to achieve and adapt it to your needs. And then I mentioned the onboarding of participants. So what we normally do in Idean, we send instructions up front to our clients and participants. An easy step-by-step guide that shows how people can get access to the collaboration workspace. So in this case, it's for Miro. So if we click one further, you see that it's an easy guide that tells you an email has been sent to your to invite you for the board. Just click accept, and then next slide. Yeah, you can get started easily and yeah, contribute into the board. So just imagine now you've prepared the workshop. You've prepared your agenda, you've prepared your digital canvas, you have your tool ready, you kind of gave a step-by-step guide to your participants, and now it's time to actually run the workshop. And Emily will walk you through on what to do then.
Okay, so the exciting part begins, also maybe a little bit intimidating for all of us, when you're actually facilitating the session. So here are some of the tips that you can keep in mind that could actually help you conduct the session as smooth and as productive as possible. So first thing first, we talk about establishing ground rules. So what we mean by that, it's doing a little bit of a grooming for the session. So because it's having a remote session is just the same as having any meetings physically. So it's nice to actually make sure that you establish meeting etiquette. So it can not only minimize interruptions, but it can also make sure that you create a professional atmosphere. So some of these things may be very common sense about muting your mics or using webcam, but make sure that you actually articulate it so that everybody's on the same page. And second is actually giving clear instructions. So one major difference between the remote workshops and also physical workshops is that you don't always have the luxury of seeing your participant's face. So in this case, you cannot actually get signals like body language or their facial expressions to know where they stand. So that's why it's very important for you to be very clear in terms of communicating the message you want to pass on. So articulate and perhaps having both verbal and written instructions so participants know what to follow and what they're expected to do. And third, using remote breakout rooms. So maybe some of you are very familiar with this using Zoom. You might come into situations where you have 20 or 50 plus participants, and that could just be mind-boggling and a lot to handle. You cannot facilitate a very productive discussions with so many people in the same room. So what we would recommend is actually to divide the participants into smaller groups and let them conduct smaller discussions in the breakout rooms, for example, what Zoom has in terms of built-in functionality. If you're not using Zoom, of course, you can also prepare by setting up perhaps separate meeting invites to accommodate that, so that participants are actually given a space so that they can discuss and participate freely. And be extra inclusive. So what do we mean by this? As facilitators for the remote workshops, we need to be very conscious of how we're engaging with our participants, because this is even more important than physical workshops, because first of all, you don't get direct feedback from them. And second of all, when their mics are mute, it's hard for them to share and it's hard for you to know who hasn't been heard. So be active. So initiate and always constantly ask for feedback if people have questions, if they have ideas. So as long as it doesn't interrupt the rhythm of the workshop, try to create a safe space so that people feel confident and comfortable to contribute. Mix up activities. So what do we mean by this? Like how we are now, I'm sure for all of us that's working from home for weeks by now, it can be very stale and very tiring when you're actually participating like a workshop that is for a few hours. It's very stationary. So keep that in mind. You don't want it to be draining and tiring for your participants. So try to find different ways to combine the activities so that you can keep the energy level up, so that people can feel focused, and you can also create a better and more fun atmosphere. So that can include both individual ideation with group discussions, having breakouts or polls. You can even do standing up discussions if you like, however you imagine. And last but not least, what we really recommend is making it into an experience. So workshops is so fun and engaging because we try to make it into an experience that is memorable and is for people to enjoy. So it's just as much about having a productive discussion, as much about having fun and building your team repertoire. So you can play music during breaks or having calm music when you're doing ideation session. Or you can also do online energizers to make sure that people actually enjoy the experience that you're facilitating. So I mentioned the energizer, and some of you might say, that's crazy. I don't want to dance in front of my computer. This is stupid. And we would actually challenge that. That might not be the only way you can do online energizer. So in the next slide, what we would show you is an example of what could happen. So instead of asking people to dance around in front of their laptops, which they might feel a bit odd, you could actually create some exercise that people can actually do using the online platform. So in this case, you can create individual space that participants can actually draw. So in this case, we're showcasing Sketch Your Neighbor. So the participants can actually explore the drawing function on the platform and just play around. And while they're actually getting comfortable with the platform, they're also interacting, and it's not exactly task focused, but it creates confidence and their comfort level for them to actually participate better in the workshop. So these are some of the examples. And so let's say you have facilitated the workshop and everything went well, you're so elevated, and what happens now? Because you don't want outputs to disappear. So what we recommend after the session ended, it's very important for you to do some sense making while the memory is fresh. So what do we mean by this? You might have a very chaotic canvas, and what you can do is to dive in and organize the inputs by clustering, creating themes, and categorizing the ideas so that you can generate some kind of sense of what has been shared during the session. So this could actually help you organize and understand what needs to be done and shared as a summary. And the good thing about the remote workshop is that everything is already digitally made. So you don't have to try to digitize the post-its or try to read what people have written on the post-its. So you can simply export the canvas and include it in the summary deck that you share. One good reason of doing so is that you actually remind and bring back the memory of the participants joining that session. So they can probably be reminded of certain ideas or discussions that they've had during the session. And last but not least, we recommend you be very honest and also ask for feedback. So the reason of doing so is that asking for feedback has two-sided benefits. So one, for yourself, it's important for you to be honest and face the both maybe compliments and criticism of how the session went. And another thing for the participants, it's also important for them to feel heard, that their opinions matter, and that you can actually create better and more efficiently facilitate a session using their feedback. So now we have talked about how to facilitate it. For the second part of the webinar today, we'll go through a small short showcase. And there will be two parts of the showcase. One is actually demonstrating and basically going through the setup of how we would actually present an onboarding session. And the second part would be the workshop example. So before I go any further and share my screen, I just want to emphasize the focus here, because today we're actually using Miro as a platform to demonstrate how we would actually do this setup. But the focus is actually not the tool itself, but rather the content. So think about the setup, and you can actually adopt the same kind of ideas using the tool that you choose with your team. So you can perhaps prepare similar preparations on Teams, whiteboard, or Miro, whichever platform that you select. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. 1 second. Okay, so yes, I hope everybody can see my screen. So one thing that we usually try to highlight is that be very conscious of what your participant sees when they first enter the workspace. So it's very important for you to articulate what the purpose is about the session, and also be clear on how they're going to spend their time with you. So on the right-hand side, you can see an example of agenda. So they can see the breakdown of the exercise, breakdown of the workshop, and also different parts of the workshop session and how they're going to participate. And another part is that you can basically prepare a welcoming page, state the purpose of the session, and also what is the immediate next step. So in this case, we talk about screen share. And regarding screen share, this is one tip from us, is that remember that your participants are actually sitting in front of their device, and they could be surrounded by all different kinds of interruptions. They could be working from home, they could be having multiple tabs that you don't see. So screen share is a way for you to make sure that you have some sort of control of them being focusing on the same screen, same areas of the canvas as you. So in this case, usually for onboarding session, we do not know if people have the same experience of the platform. So it's very important for you to do a brief introduction of the functionality that they're going to use. So in this case, we go through the main toolbar. So what that means is that we highlight the functionality that they will actually be using during the workshop. For example, text and post-its. You can go as far as actually showcasing them how to actually utilize these tools so that they can see that it's being done. And another point that we want to also address is that one thing is about participating and creating inputs for the workshop, another is about navigating within the document. You might have multiple canvases and instruction page that it just becomes a massive document. So make sure that you also address how participants are going to navigate within this canvas. So in this case, we highlight that they can navigate using the frame panel, and we also highlight the tool of chat. So using the chat function, they can actually participate and by giving questions or making sure that they're on the right page. So highlighting these navigation tools will help the participants feel more supported and guided throughout the session. In the onboarding session, we can also provide guidelines on recommended setup. So this could be equipments that we recommend them having, perhaps 2 monitors and having working mic, or anything that would actually make them feel a bit more comfortable and enjoyable to just sit in front of this device and actually participate in the session. So it's one thing to actually demonstrate the tool. It's another for the participants to actually use it themselves. So what we have created here is something called a playground. So a playground is actually a simple workspace for the participants to be guided to go through very simple exercise that would actually feature the work tools that you have highlighted in the walkthrough. So in this case, we have 3 parts asking the participants to create post-its. So they can test it out, the function by themselves, so they can go through the actions of doing it without you actually doing it for them. So it would actually increase their comfort level and also their confidence on contributing and sharing ideas, because the workshop is only as productive as how comfortable they are. So make sure that you show them how they can actually create text, how can they share discussion. And in this case, we also generate dots to help us vote so that using that heat map can help us filter ideas. If we zoom out, you can actually see that we create individual workspace for each participant. So this is a basic setup for an onboarding session. So that's it, you have now successfully conducted an onboarding and everybody's ready to go. So what happens now? We'll do a walkthrough of a basic workshop. So similar, you want to create a welcome slide or a landing page where people can actually be introduced into the workspace to talk about the purpose. And you can also showcase the agenda. So in this case, we highlight the different types of session. So ideation versus discussion. So this is actually making sure that they understand how their time is going to be spent with you. We also highlight specific meeting etiquette that we mentioned earlier. Full attention, no other device. This is just the same as having a physical meetings, asking participants not to have their phones on. So another thing that we want to highlight is who is here with us today. So, for example, when you're actually facilitating a remote workshop, you don't want to make the participants feel like they're just talking into a void. So you want to both cultivate the team atmosphere and also acknowledge their presence. So in this case, we create small headshots of people that are participating in the session, and it's also a good way for them to do quick introduction. In a project setting, you might be able to build up the team repertoire and make sure that they feel part of the team. When you're facilitating the remote workshops, like Caroline mentioned, you can make use of the existing templates of the platform. So in this case, Miro has a lot of different types of templates that you can use. I believe also Whiteboard and Miro also have the similar functions. That being said, sometimes you just want something that is not available. So you can also customize it yourself. Our tip would be keeping it very simple. So there's a balance between tools and purpose. So you don't want the participants to actually focus on how to actually figure out the tool. You want them to focus on the content. So in this case, our canvas always have a few elements. Here you can see an internal workshop. This is a canvas that we customize, and it's containing a common space where people can work together so that they can actually cluster and place their post-its together on the screen. And it's also composed of main questions, so what the participants are supposed to answer. This is about the key objective of that particular exercise. In addition to that, we also have prompts. So because when you're actually doing ideation session for, let's say, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, you don't want to be constantly talking because otherwise people can't concentrate. So what you do is that you can have written prompts, hints that can actually nudge our participants into approaching the same questions from different angles and different perspectives. So this can actually get them thinking, and without you actually verbally saying it again and again. Another element that we want to recommend is to actually have the timestamp on the canvas. So for example, here it states 5 minutes. It allows us to actually have an idea of when to actually wrap up the exercise. So in this case, you can see a working canvas being done. So this is an example of how it could look like, and you can simply export the canvas so that the participants can be reminded of actually how the exercise went about, and you can also document the output. So this is a basic framework of how the workshop setup could be. And now I'm going to stop sharing so Caroline can actually do a bit of wrap up.
Yes. Thank you, Emily, for the wonderful walkthrough. Let's wrap up. So I guess there was a lot of information for you guys right now. Let's just remember the key points. So preparation is super important when running remote workshops. You want to prepare well your canvases, your activities, and also build up your participants' confidence in using the tool and getting familiar so that they can focus on the content. Always test and retest whatever you're trying to do and use your co-facilitator for the tech support. Give clear instructions for the task, as Emily has shown you. You can also name them out on the canvases itself and make it an engaging experience. The example of the drawing your neighbor is just one of them. Just make it fun as you would do in a normal setting. So next slide. So we hope we could give you some tips and tricks on how to run your remote workshops. Try it out, it's super much fun, and we wish you happy remote workshopping. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to us. There you find our email addresses. If you have other questions that you want to take offline, or just share your experience, we're happy to hear from you. Yeah, so I think now we have only a few minutes left to answer some questions. And let's take some of them. So one is whether it costs anything for participants to create a Miro account, and what about the organizer? So you can invite for free your participants. There's a sort of a guest functionality that you can use to invite your participants for free. And as a facilitator, there's also a free version, but it's of course a limited one, and then it's license-based tool. Feel free to add, Emily, if there is anything.
Nothing to add, but I do see that there's another question about pre-baked video while talking, and one person. No, everything is live here.
Yeah, no, that was live.
Yeah.
So Emily, maybe to ask you, what is the first, like if now someone is super excited, what would be a first easy step for someone to get started with remote workshops?
I would say, so take a deep breath. You're not alone. We're all in this boat together. And remember that it's about keeping it simple, and find out what you want to get out of the workshop, and work with your team. And you find the right tools for yourselves and basically plan it. Just make preparations. It is very, very important.
Yes. So see, time is running up. If there are more questions, please take them offline with us. We're here for you. And if you like this webinar, there are also a few more coming up in the pipeline. So just check out itpraten.no or LinkedIn and Facebook as you found this webinar. There are a few more coming. And yeah, hope to see you in some shape or form again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. And thanks for the feedback in the chat. Lovely to see you.